Hello and welcome to episode number 7 of the Recruitcha podcast. Today I'm joined by a special guest and we'll be speaking with Paris Bland, the founder of Digital Executive. Paris has started multiple businesses across events, tourism, and now nearshoring, including grossing over $1.3 million in sales at Mattress Firm and becoming the youngest store manager in Austin. So Paris, thank you so much for joining. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Harrison, for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Let's jump into it. So you mentioned starting Digital Executive by taking a few meetings to see what was out there and ended up landing 3 contracts. What's been the biggest misconception that US companies have about nearshoring, and how do you find yourself overcoming that?
I think it has to be that it's low skilled labor. There's a lot of, Fiverr, Upwork, some of these just almost like call them virtual task rabbits, essentially, where you're paying somebody a very low wage and they're coming in, they're doing a small piece of the job. Really, what we specialize in and what you find in South America is the talent is similar to talent that you would get in the United States. Right. Like, especially in the places that we hire, the education's very high. The work culture is very similar to the US because they've had so many large Fortune 500 companies come in and invest in certain specific areas. So the work culture is so similar that it really does almost feel like you have a US based employee. So getting people to shift that mind frame of like, hey, no, this is not somebody that's going to be working on the periphery of your team. They're going to be an essential team member. They're going to come in, they're going to have ideas. And even pairing that with cost too, I think that's been the biggest hurdle because so many folks, they've had a bad experience because they've hired somebody very part-time in the Philippines or maybe India, and then switching to South America and getting that cultural shift. It's a stark difference. You have to think about it as a US based hire.
Right. So it's almost like a US based hire, just literally in a different country. But the
Exactly.
quality is still there, the talent's still there.
Yeah, and I think really the work culture too. The work culture is the same. It's very, very similar. So yeah, the integration's a lot easier. And I've actually noticed sometimes when people they'll get used to working with a completely different work culture, shifting back to South America can sometimes be challenging because people just won't take being talked to in a specific way or a certain way.
Very interesting. So you mentioned India and Philippines, and then people kind of finding better fits in Latin America. Previously, you worked at a company that had half their team in India, and this was kind of like the light bulb, as I understand it, for you to start Digital Executive. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience and how it shaped you wanting to start your company now?
Yeah, absolutely. This was a big aha moment for me because I'd always worked in South America. I've had some other companies that I started. Um, and we'd always hired in South America. That always had been my hiring pool. So I didn't really realize how prevalent it was for people to outsource their developers to India. In the company that I was working for specifically, I just remember there were so many miscommunication issues. And this isn't true for every company, right? Every company is different. But at the one that I was at specifically, it was a constant miscommunication. I have this very distinct memory of the CEO having a conversation with one of the developers, and he asked, "Hey, is this done?" And the guy replied, "Okay, yeah." And I remember the CEO goes, "Great, it's done." And I said, wait, let's hold up because we talked yesterday and I don't think that this feature is done. So I asked him, he goes, no. I was saying I'll go get it done. And it was that communication lost us so much time because the US team was thinking that things were done when they weren't. And it was just a language barrier. Also, we were taking meetings really late at night. I remember being up till 11 p.m., midnight, sometimes 3 a.m., just working with the team. And there was so much time that was lost because if they at 3 a.m. had a snag and they're waiting on the US team to reply, it was really ineffective. And so I thought, okay, why don't we at least try to put some of the sales team in South America? That way it's the same time zone. We're communicating at the same time. We're not sending messages to people at 4 a.m. Um, and once we made that shift, it really did make a huge difference. That was really the light bulb moment for me. And okay, this is a more viable path, at least for soft skills. Again, development teams are a little bit different. I think you can really build your culture where you'd like, but specifically for soft skill roles. And I went to a networking event and I remember, gosh, this was an early stage networking event. I think every single person there, they didn't even have a business, they had an idea. And I set 5 meetings. And of those 5 meetings, 3 of them closed on the spot. And then one of them ended up closing. And to this day is still a client of mine. And one of my larger clients, they ended up closing about 6 months later once they actually got funding and started to roll out. But I just realized that there were people didn't realize that South America was even an option to hire in.
Wow. And then what did it look like to actually start building that network? You started a couple of other businesses, but not necessarily in talent acquisition. What were those first months like learning this whole new game?
Uh, so I'd done a little bit of hiring, but I wasn't a recruiter when I started this company,
Yeah.
which is crazy. But I honestly think that works to our benefit because we don't, and even when I hire now, I don't hire people that are trained recruiters. Most of my recruiters are former business owners or they're former managers. So I really just focus on knowing people more than anything. And this sounds so stupid. I can't believe this is actually coming out of my mouth, but I always joke that we hire off of vibes. And again, that sounds so dumb, but I really do think that that's such a big portion that you miss because somebody can have a perfect resume, on paper look great. And if they just have a personality that does not get along with the CEO, it's not going to work. And so a lot of times we'll actually take people who they might not be qualified for the role. They might be a step below, but in the current role they're doing as an EA, half the stuff they're doing is project management experience. We'll promote them. They'll be a junior project manager and we will bring them on with that title because they have a good personality, they're willing to learn, and they're gung ho. It's more about the hunger than anything.
Yeah. Talking about culture, that's something that I've seen in your profile. You've spoken about a lot, and you really want your rock stars from Latin America to have a great relationship with your clients. How do you go about assessing that culture fit in the process?
I really wish that there was a way that we could do this, right? We could say that we grade on the scale, and there are personality tests. I see people do this all the time, right? Where they'll scale personality, and every company has their own method to doing this. For us, it really comes down to conversation, and we do this off camera, and we just have a conversation about, hey, what are you looking for? What's important to you? Tell me about a job you really liked. Tell me about a job you really hated. Why did you hate it? And I feel like you could learn so much about people asking them about their least favorite boss. And then we compare that to the personality of whoever they're working with. Because just from meeting with someone, I can, kind of assume there's, I think, a few different major CEO personalities. You have kind of like your gung ho CEO who's really active and very pushy. You have to put them with a type A person. You have to put them with a person like we hire a lot of moms for those types of roles who are used to having 15 balls in the air and can just multitask really well. And then you have, CEOs who are sometimes a little bit more absent minded. They're dropping all the balls themselves. So they need someone to kind of come in and organize everything. We tend to hire a lot more type B personalities for that, which seems odd, but I don't know why it works. And then, you also have CEOs who are maybe somewhere in between or their time is just divided and they really need someone who's going to be a high level operator. So those are really like the three tropes that we hire under.
Yeah.
But yeah, we mainly work with CEOs and it's about finding we call it like professional matchmaking, right? Their pair.
Yeah. No, I think that's an awesome insight. And I haven't thought about that before to think about the type of the CEO and then matching up or even balancing the kind of person that they're going to work with. One of the things, obviously, hiring from Latin America, these are rock stars. And one of the big things is the cost differential, in addition to the culture aspect. What does the typical cost differential look like in terms of hiring from Latin America, say through digital executive versus going onshore, like in the US?
It's about a 75% difference. So, on average, right, if you're looking and again, it'll vary pretty widely dependent on what type, but usually between 60 and 75% cost savings. And that's because I don't, depending on where you live, the salaries in the US have gotten really kind of crazy, even for a lot of basic level roles, for doctor's offices, dentist offices. I see postings for 25 bucks an hour in the US. And those dentist offices can't afford that. They're just hiring, if they would have had a staff of maybe 3 or 4 people, they have 1 or 2 on staff. So I call it like 2013 pricing. The pricing that you expect in South America right now is typically what you would have been paying in 2013 in the US.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I can see how if you can find someone, like you said, with the same level of quality from Latin America, then you're going to have the massive saving. How do you go about trying to find these rock stars? You mentioned hiring moms. Do you have any like secret sauce of how you go infiltrating these communities?
To be honest, I mean, we do kind of guerrilla recruitment. But we also sometimes if we get a really good candidate, and this happened recently, we had 2 absolute rock star candidates for one role. It was one of those situations where the guy was totally on the fence. He ended up picking person A. We hired person B and we put them with another client almost immediately. I think it was like a same day hire because we had just gotten through the recruitment process, just finalized the job description. And we said, hey, look, we already have somebody. We're going to put them there. So I think it's a lot of times, especially because we hire for so many similar roles, trying just to move people around. If we get somebody really good in, keeping them in orbit, there's no reason if I get a rock star candidate in that I should let them go to the wayside. So I think that that's been, now that we're at the volume that we're at, we've been able to do that, which has been, that was the click, right? That was the shift for us versus like each role having to start from scratch.
So building that talent matrix of really good rock stars, getting them to also refer people that they know that are great.
To be honest, and this is probably an unpopular opinion, I actually don't like referrals that much. Every
Sure.
once in a while, we'll get somebody who's really good in off a referral, but I think that the strongest candidates oftentimes just come from people that are in network or their former employees. So we've had that happen quite a bit actually, where we'll have, especially working with startups, right? Like startups will hire a bunch and then fire a bunch. Somebody stops working with us, they get fired, whatever it might be. We'll contact them if we get a role that would fit for them in a year because we get to know our people really well. Anyone that's working for us, we really get to know. And we actually just had this happen. We've actually had this happen a few times, but this week we just made a new hire from somebody that worked with us a year ago with another client, and we're super excited to have him back on the team. But it's also, it's about creating a culture where people want to come back as well.
Right. So just in terms of your model, are you hiring these rock stars for digital executive and then outsourcing them to the companies, or the companies hiring them outright through you?
We do both.
Okay.
So a lot of times, and it really just depends, to be honest, how you want to break up the recruitment fee, right? Some companies, especially because they're trying to keep their burn rate lower, it makes sense for them to pay us and keep us on a monthly retainer. That way, we also do replacements for the duration of the contract. So if somebody, for whatever reason, stops working out, or even doesn't even stop working out, but the needs of the organization shift and they need to put a new hire in that slot, it's a little bit more flexible. But certain industries just like to work with a person directly. Like I've noticed marketing industries are like, I just want to give you money and I'm going to get my person and let's never talk again. Versus startups are like, yeah, let's keep the burn rate down. Let's stretch this lump sum out over the course of multiple months.
Much as we can until we're going to raise again.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they'll raise again and then they might buy out some people. We're
There we
flexible.
go.
Look,
You got to be flexible in this business. Nice. So you mentioned a couple of success stories here. For listeners who are skeptical that international hiring can deliver this balance of like costs and quality, do you have any other success stories that you found, like amazing that you've done that kind of prove this point that like Latin America has really amazing talent at a really affordable price?
yeah, I think one of my favorites, we have multiple people that have worked for us for like 3 separate years, and that's really cool to see, right? That, they've had multiple clients over the course of 3 years. They've been with us the entire time. It's just because we found them early. They like working with us. They like the culture, and they wanna have a career with us. And so even, I have this one woman that's worked with us. She's about to be on her 3rd year anniversary, but the first client that she was assigned, they loved her. But their company, unfortunately, saw a really serious downturn. So they had to let her go. They tried to keep her on part-time, but they just didn't have the capital coming in for it. So we were able to place her with another client who feels the same way. And now they're doing really more project management. So she was able to get a promotion. She started with us as an executive assistant and then learned all these skills and now is doing full-fledged project management with another client. So she's actually been able to upskill herself, have a career, have an increased salary. And seeing that is like, that's cool. We hired her right out of college and now she's a project manager. It's really cool to see. I think I wouldn't necessarily call it just like a success story, but just something that I like seeing is just somebody who's been with the same company for 3 years and they really like working with that group of people. They're like their own little family. They get each other gifts. And, I think we even have some hires that have been really difficult. They've asked us to do the impossible, and we've been able to deliver on that. That's been cool as well. We had one of these recently where they basically said, hey, we want a CMO level who knows how to run events, which is hard to find in the US, impossible to find outside of the US, but we were able to find somebody. And she basically created a cult following around this business. It's crazy. And they're saving tons of money getting a CMO level person. And it's a good culture fit. Like that aha moment was awesome, right? Like being able to staff those impossible roles.
Oh, those are some good stories. And then in terms of so you got the culture side, you got the talent side. You mentioned like you want someone who's been in the company, say 3 years, obviously not too job hoppy. Are there any other signals that you're looking for in talent to kind of indicate that someone's got a high bar?
It's so funny. I actually asked this question to recruiters that I'm hiring, right? So if I'm personally hiring a recruiter, I ask them, like, what are your candidate red flags? Job hopping is a big one, right? If somebody has a ton of job postings that are all like 3 to 4 months, uh, that's like an instant no hire for me. To be honest, I think a lot of it has to do, we have some really strict standards and some things that we put into the process that kind of, they seem really nitpicky, but the right candidate will do it. For example, you can't be more than 3 minutes late. And in reality, if you're a minute late, if you're not on when it starts, we end the interview. If it's after 3 minutes, we end it. We do not do reschedules unless somebody lets us know ahead of time. And we also are very picky on gauging candidate interest. So we talk to candidates multiple times. We'll ask them to do kind of, I'd say, annoying tasks for us during the process. Like if they complete an assessment, we might ask them to redo it. We just see how willing they are to engage with the process. Because if somebody's not making the interview, if they're rescheduling, if they're not making themselves available, if they're having a quote unquote family emergency, I found that real candidates that really want the job won't do those things. They'll make it their priority. So if you're having to chase after a candidate, it's usually not the right fit.
Yeah, no, those are definitely some good pointers. I think we can definitely take some of those things from that. I really like the one about if you're not coming to the interview on time, then that's probably the end of the road for you. It's just immediately showing that you're not giving that kind of commitment and dedication.
Even response times, like if somebody isn't responding pretty quickly to our emails, messages, because we text people. Like if send someone an email, we'll send them a text that says, "Hey, we just sent you an email." If you're not responding to our emails or our text, it's probably not a fit. And it's just, we don't want to waste our clients' time too and present them a candidate who's going to get the offer and reject it or just not want the actual job. Because it happens. And, even with everything we do, sometimes it still happens. But candidate interest is the number, I think, apart from basic qualifications, is the number one thing you need to pay attention to when hiring.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're nearly near the end. I've got one more question for you. So you've grown digital executive for the past 3 years. What skill sets are you seeing becoming the most important coming out of Latin America and that's being demanded from the US?
Yeah. So things have shifted quite a bit. I remember we hired a virtual assistant position when I first started. And this sounds so stupid to say now, but they literally hired this person to sit on their Zoom recordings and take notes, which is crazy now, right? Because you have Otter, Gemini, Firefly. There's so many different things that you can use. So we're seeing a lot of these like basic entry level roles be replaced by AI, right? Those jobs don't exist anymore. They're AI jobs. A lot of cold calling jobs are kind of going by the wayside. We have seen an increase though. People are still hiring. They're still using that budget. But let's say they would have hired a virtual assistant that they wanted to have social media presence or social media experience. That same company is just hiring a social media manager now, and maybe they still have one or two VA tasks. So it has been cool to see the shift into skilled roles and skilled labor. That was something I was surprised to see with AI. Everyone always asks me, "Oh, AI is coming for these jobs." I'm like, yeah, AI is replacing really low level skilled jobs, but it's allowing companies to just hire for specific roles that are going to propel a company and be a more valuable hire to the company in the future.
So specializing in those certain skills and then almost like leveraging off of the basic tasks that AI is doing to get the max value.
Yeah. And a social media manager that knows how to use AI to complete some VA tasks is going to be way more valuable than, a generalist VA who is trying to figure out your Instagram algorithm. It's just not going to work.
Well, Paris, thank you so much. This has been a seriously insightful conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time. For anyone who wants to connect with you and learn more about digital executive, where can they do that?
I am super active on LinkedIn. So that's always a really easy, I am always in my DMs and I will respond to you. So
Our response time is instant. High signal. All
it's
right, awesome. Thank you so much, Paris.